Good morning, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us on this wonderful day here in the U.S. and hopefully the same over there in Southern Africa. I am Peter Firth, and I will be hosting this webinar, and I'd like to give you a couple of ground rules to begin with. First of all, please mute your mics for everyone who's not speaking at any point, and when you have questions, you can either put them in the chat room or you can raise your hand at some point, but our format will be that we will have three presenters this morning following an intro from the Trade Hub. And then after the three presenters do their presentations, we'll do a Q&A. Some of you have sent questions in advance. And for those of you who did, we'll do our best to address them. And then those of you who have questions based on what's presented, let us know as well. I'll give you a brief introduction of myself, and then we'll go on from there. I have been involved in the import business my entire life. I grew up in a family business. I really started over 45 years ago, and this is pretty much my whole life's work. We were importers and processors of herbs and spices in the United States and a major part of that industry. We sold our business in the late 1980s. I stayed on for a couple of years, and then I left to run the American Spice Trade Association for 4 years before leaving there and going out on my own. Over the last 20 or so years, we've done, my colleague Derek, who's on as well, and I and some others have done a lot of primarily US aid projects around the world and some other development projects in all areas of the world, mostly focused on agricultural exports, export development, processing questions, trade links, etc. Our role and just so you know, it says I have a BA in economics from the University of Worcester, but it's really the University of Rochester in New York. So I don't want to do my alma mater injustice. Our format today is that we'll have a welcome from the project folks, from Tammy, and I'll introduce him in a minute. And then I'll give you what we're really hoping to achieve today. I'll introduce our three presenters, and then we'll go on from there. So Tammy, we'll bring you up first. If you could move to that slide, I'd appreciate it. Tammy Dlamini is working with the U.S. Trade Hub in Southern Africa. He's focusing on facilitating linkages between exporting firms, buyers, and capital providers, and supporting SMMEs that are trying to export to the United States primarily. He's facilitated production, certification, and export programs from parts of Africa and to the EU, and he's going to talk about how we're trying to help you facilitate exports to the United States. Tammy, welcome.
Thank you very much, Peter, and welcome to all our participants on behalf of the USAID Trade Hub. I'll just give a brief overview of what we do as the USAID Trade Hub. We have an integrated approach that has three objectives. All of these objectives work towards enhancing exports to destinations. We focus on the South African market under Objective 1. Our objective is to increase exports from the countries that we work in. We currently work in 9 countries. So we are working on increasing exports from 8 countries into South Africa. And the main reason is South Africa is a good springboard for export. And today we are doing cosmetics and food ingredients. And ingredients are a key part of what South African firms require to then export into the US primarily and other export destinations. And then under Objective 2, we work to increase the flow of capital from South Africa through capital providers that are in South Africa and transaction advisors that are employed that are contracted to support firms to ensure that they are ready to meet the capital providers and they meet the requirements of the capital providers. Here, the investment is in the form of capital, which may be financial capital, but it's also in the form of technology. For instance, if you look at our agriculture, most of the countries are trying to mechanize agriculture. So part of what we look at is how can we work with firms in in the countries outside South Africa to easily access this machinery and other technology? Would it be bottling? Would it be technology that is IT related? Would it be technology that enhances the access of capital to firms? That also forms part of our second objective. And then on the third objective, this is ensuring that countries sustainably and increasingly utilize AGOA. We know that AGOA has over 6,000 products that are able to access the US market duty-free and most of the time quota-free. But we understand that a lot of our countries, a lot of our firms are not so ready to ensure that they fully exploit that. We have noticed that a lot of countries are using only a few lines out of those 6,000 plus product lines. So here we have been working with government partners. We have been working with trade promotion agencies. We have been working with agencies that are appointed by government to put together utilization strategies to say, because now you have signed AGOA, how do you then utilize and increase the utilization of AGOA to benefit the exporting companies and also to benefit the country? And then we also additionally have two buy-ins, which is the Zambia buy-in and the East Africa buy-in. Both of these work towards supporting countries to utilize trade agreements and also to promote activity between the US and in East Africa, it's between the US and 5 East African countries. So as we start this session, would just like to implore that participants fully grasp what is here, and you will be advised on where you can get additional information and how you can reach out to the presenters here. But all in all, the objective is to ensure that we increase the amount of product going out into export from the countries and also attracting investment into the countries. So Peter, over to you and all the best during the presentation.
Thank you so much. So once again, I'd like to welcome everybody. I understand we have about 100 participants on the webinar today, and we hope that what we present to you today will be helpful to you in your attempts to try to, or learning curve and attempts to try to export your products to the US market. I will tell you that I said earlier, I've been in the importing and food business my entire life. I have never seen such a challenging time for imports and for transportation and for supply chain and for all sorts of issues in my whole life. Everything from getting a container to getting your product, dealing with COVID, dealing with transport issues, dealing with rising prices, dealing with a war now. It is not an easy time, and as I've been saying to people that we've been working with in this project and elsewhere, you have to have a lot of perseverance and you have to have a lot of patience right now. Buyers here, importers here are literally overwhelmed every day dealing with problems, straightening out issues, and doing what they need to do to keep their flow of goods and business going. So if you are not currently supplying to the United States, you need to just keep working at it. You need to take time and you need to follow up and you need to be patient and you need to persevere. And if you do, and if you are doing the right job, somewhere in the long term, you'll catch your break and you'll become a supplier. Our goal today is to introduce you to 3 esteemed senior members of the industry of food and cosmetics and ingredients, and to let you hear from them, from their perspective, what it takes to be a really great supplier to the importers and to the markets in the United States. So I'd like to tell you who our 3 presenters are. We will ask them each to talk a little bit about their business and what they're looking for and what matters to them and what they think will help you be successful. And then we'll open it up to Q&A. Our first presenter will be Donnie Edson. He is the Executive Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer of Smirks. Smirks is a very large food ingredients business based in Colorado. They import from 35 countries. They have warehouses around the country. And Donnie very proudly has told us that they will top $100 million of sales this year and over $50 million of products. Donnie comes from the food industry. He was a chef. He was a general manager in the food business. He joined one of his childhood friends to take over Smirks, and he took over the company in March 2010. And he began building from there to what is today a very successful business. Our second presenter is Mark Reiner. Mark has been in the cosmetics business and the beauty industry for over 25 years. He had worked in a global advertising agency, Young and Rubicon, but he joined his family business, which was doing beauty contract manufacture, a contractor, a third-party manufacturer that his father had founded. They did a huge amount of widespread work throughout the beauty products and cosmetic industry. They were dealing with hair care, skin care, and body treatments. They grew it very successfully, and then they sold their business a number of years ago, which he'll tell you about. And then he has been doing consulting services to a really leading number of hair care and skincare clients around the country and around the world as well. Our third participant is Donald Wilkes. Donald is in the flavoring business. He too has over 40 years of experience in the food and beverage industry. We're all either becoming the no hair or the white haired folks. Donald founded Blue Pacific Flavors in 1993. They have wholly owned manufacturing facilities around the world, including in China. They're involved in Tanzania with vanilla and doing other work around the world. He has done a lot of work in food and beverage. He's an industry expert, and he knows all about the flavoring business, so he'll be able to talk about that. So I will ask Donnie to start off and tell us a bit about yourself and your background, a little more than I said, and really what your business is and what matters to you as an importer and a seller of ingredients.
Great. Thanks, Peter. And hello to everyone. Nice to meet you, Paul. So yeah, my background is originally in culinary arts. I always had a passion for food, but I also always had a passion for numbers and business. So I began my career as a chef in California and quickly moved up the ranks to start running restaurants there. As much as I enjoy cooking, I really love crunching numbers and problem solving as much as I do cooking as well. In 2010, I had the opportunity to move back to Colorado from California and take over running Smirks. Smirks started as originally as a food brand that was selling packaged goods to the retail industry in the U.S., and it complemented our other business, which was a sunflower seed factory. So we would sell planting seeds to farmers and then contract to buy back the seed at the end of the harvest. We would process all the product, and then we ship it to all the companies that use sunflower seeds around the world. As we were selling sunflower seeds, a lot of our customers started to ask us for other ingredients besides sunflower seeds. And we were spending a lot of time at international trade shows. So we developed a supply chain network of people in the dried fruit, nut, grains, seeds, sweeteners, and oil industries. And we just began importing products in and selling it to our customers in the U.S. That business did so well that we sold the sunflower seed business, and we focus solely on Smirks now. So we are based in Colorado. We also have an office in California, and then we have warehouses in New Jersey. We have 3 warehouses in the West Coast, in California and Nevada, and we have a warehouse in Denver. Our clients include some of the larger retailers in the U.S., such as Costco, Kroger, Walmart, Sam's Club, and some of the smaller regional grocery chains around the U.S., like Sprouts and Natural Grocers. We also sell to some of the large cereal companies and food manufacturing companies such as Kellogg's, General Mills, Kind Bar, and we also sell into the pet food industry. We sell into the cosmetic industry, and we sell into the baking industry. So currently we import from 35 countries, and last year was just over 50 million pounds of products. And so that's a little bit about our business. Every year we see between 30 and 40% growth in our business, and we're on track for that again this year. And we consider ourselves the next generation of food importers. So as you mentioned, the white hair people in the group, I came in knowing nothing but the food safety side of stuff. So it was easy for me to adapt, and we built our business around food safety. and around sustainability and around a lot of the initiatives that are very important for everybody today. So I was fortunate that I didn't come up in the times where it didn't quite matter for us. For our business model, transparency is incredibly important on our supply chain to our customers. So we will lay out our complete supply chain to our customers from day one and explain to them why we choose the process. And also, as we're setting up new suppliers, we'll explain to our customers why we're choosing to do it that way. So on that note, some of the things that we look for in setting up new supply chain. First and foremost, it's customer driven or it's innovation driven. So if a customer comes to us and asks us for an ingredient from a specific origin, then we'll get to work on putting it together for them. Or if a retailer comes to us and asks us for a specific ingredient from a specific origin. But also our team every year we try to launch 3 or 4 new products that we find to be innovative into the marketplace. We do that through our marketing network that we have with access to thousands of people, and we do marketing updates monthly, and we launch new items, and when we do, they seem to do very well for us. So that's how we kind of choose a new ingredient. Sometimes it's a supplier reaching out to us, cold calling us or emailing us and just telling us about their new ingredient. We'll dive in and we'll think if there's room for it in the market, or if we think it's really cool, then we'll start the process to set it up. Most of the time when we're setting up a new ingredient, if it's not an existing thing that exists in the marketplace, it can take anywhere from 12 to 24 months as we start the information on it. We do our own testing on it, and we put feelers out into the marketplace. If it's an existing ingredient that somebody asks us to get, though, it's a lot quicker. And the process for us as a company is we begin our vetting process. So the vetting process starts first and foremost with food safety. To sell in the United States, it has to have a certain certification to be able to make it to the marketplace. Those certifications include BRC or an equivalency of BRC, which would be an FSSC certification, a Primus certification, or an SQF certification. If we find an ingredient that we really like in the U.S. and want to bring it into the U.S. and it doesn't have one of those certifications, that's not a hurdle for us. We just have to decide which factory we can run it through somewhere else to get it to the level that we need it to be at. So if somebody's got a new innovative ingredient, we have to make sure that it's safe. But if they don't have all the processes in place to get it there, we do have people that we use to do that around the world. From Africa, a lot of stuff does find its way into Holland. There's a lot of factories in Holland that specialize in cleaning products from Africa to make it safe and to get the certifications that are needed to bring it into the U.S. It's a little bit more work, and it's not an ideal situation for us, but that's one thing we have done in the past if we find something that we really like to bring into the U.S. Another thing that's going to be important is the FDA. You got to have an FDA registration as your company to be able to bring it into the U.S. And that process isn't near as bad as the food safety certification side of stuff. So don't be intimidated from the FDA side of things. The next things that we're looking for is to decide if the partners we're working with, are they an actual processor of the product or are they a trader of the product? So we try to work with processors so that we can put the whole supply chain together and get the food safety stuff, do our visits, and get it set up so that it's safe to bring into the U.S. and know that it's a processor. But in some cases, some items need to be worked with traders because it might come from multiple different spots and need to be collected and sent to us. So we work with both sides of the supply chain on that. After we've kind of gone through our vetting process and we've checked the boxes and we've started to see what risks might be associated with the product, we'll generally come and visit on site, or we'll send a representative in a region to come visit. So we do have representatives around the world on every continent that will go visit factories for us and do audits for us. Or we can use a third-party company to go do an audit that's specific to our company and to our customers' needs as well. And then after we've done that, we start a little bit further more on the analysis of risk for us to bring it into the U.S. Some of the risks that we look for are foreign material. So what things are in place to keep the foreign material out of the product? Because that's the quickest way to ruin an ingredient or to have a recall is if there's foreign material inside of the product. After that, it's going to be the microbiological side of things. So is this product safe to eat, or does it need to go through a pasteurization process or a sterilization process? So that's the next thing we're going to determine. And then we're going to look at the sustainability of it. Is this something that we can order year round? Is it something that we need to order and put in our warehouse and store to have it year round? Or is it something that, is only available for a short period of time? If it is available for a short period of time, then we're going to go a little bit further into the shelf life of the product and make sure that it's going to be still edible or safe to eat after it sits in our warehouse for a period of time. And then lastly, if it's an organic item, then we're going to really dig into the organic side of things too. If it's a new item, we're going to test for every pesticide that we can on it. And we're going to make sure that there's an organic transaction certificate each time we buy a container, so that the organic body that certifies the plant guarantees that it's organic when it comes to us. So that's a little bit about our vetting process and our process to bring in new ingredients and launch it into the marketplace inside the United States. So some of the things to kind of touch on what Peter was mentioning earlier too, the current market space and what we're seeing with everything. We are coming off COVID and it's starting to get a little bit easier. So some of the extreme delays that we saw as an importer in the US was really hard to get shipping containers. So the processors could make the product and then we couldn't get the shipping containers for a period of time. So we were already running into shelf life issues with product where it might sit for 6 weeks after it was made. Then it went into the shipping containers. We were seeing extreme port delays into the United States, particularly on the West Coast, sometimes as much as 2 months from the normal transit time. It made it very difficult to manage our inventory and manage our cash flow. The general terms that we work off is cash against documents. So when you present the documents to us, we pay you for the goods. So if it gets stuck in the port for 2 months, then our cash just sits there. And when you bring in as much product as we do, that adds up very quickly. So all the importers right now are managing their cash flow very tightly on it. And then after that, it's been just getting paid inside the United States. A lot of customers are paying slower because they're managing their cash flow as well, too, on our side. So some growth opportunities that we're seeing inside the U.S. right now from our business. Fruit's very, very hot right now. And there's a lot of innovation happening with fruit. There's a lot of innovation happening with fruit out of Africa. There's been some really nice factories that have come online in Africa, and it can grow so many different kinds of fruit. But some of the things we're seeing is, taking a second grade fruit, pulverizing it and making it into a cube or a bite, and then adding different flavors into that. The market really likes single ingredient fruit things right now. So fruit that's not been added with sugar, but is naturally sweet. And then some of the other innovations with fruit, we're seeing a different drying methods. So you can make a crispy fruit instead of just having a chewy fruit. There's some innovation happening with freeze drying. It's making it easier to do it, and you're going to end up with a nicer product when it's done as well. And the market's really been asking for a lot more things like that. Americans are snacking a lot. They're snacking almost more than they're eating meals. So having things that they could buy a bag of and snack on daily, that's the best products that we're finding right now, because they eat it daily. It's so much better than if you buy something to bake with at home and it sits in your cabinet for a year while you use a little bit of it. This is something that people will eat on a daily basis, go back and buy more, So that's a little bit from my side right now, and I'll look forward to answering questions when everybody else is done. So
thank you, Donnie, very much. That was very helpful. I'd like to think that pre-COVID you had more hair and none of it was white, given all that's going on. But I know from your pictures that's not totally true.
No, it's genetics. Yeah.
Next, we're going to move on to Mark Reiner. Mark will introduce himself and talk about the cosmetic and beauty industry and what it takes to be a supplier there.
My name's Mark Reiner. I started in the beauty industry about 25 years ago. I joined a family business that my father actually started that formulates, manufactures, and fills beauty products. Initially, I started in customer service and business development, then got more immersed in the family business and took on more responsibility. And I learned early on that in doing customer service and business development, I learned early on that everything was about the product. Everything was about the formula. So if we didn't have the most innovative, high quality and premium formulas, we had nothing. And I was at the mercy often of our research and development team to kind of create the best products out there. We also, many of our customers were Fortune 500 major global beauty companies like Estee Lauder, L'Oreal, Procter & Gamble, companies like that. So we were not only competing against our own competitors, we were competing against those kind of companies that had their own in-house labs, and they were developing their own formulas, and we had to be better and quicker than their formulas. So I learned early on that we were limited in terms of our research and development bench team. That I would come back to them with innovative concepts and things that I presented, and they would tell me, "Oh, that can't be done. That's never been done." So I learned R&D myself. I learned formulations myself, self-taught. I bought every new launch of hair care products, skincare products, bath and body products that were unique and compelling and interesting and spoken about in the beauty press, and figured out how to reverse engineer them. And then I became a formulator. And then after a self-taught formulator, I took classes for more formal training. I did see eventually I oversaw all formulations for a broad spectrum of global clients. Most of them were fully global or in different markets. My father and I sold our family business in 2007 to a private equity firm that was really a strategic roll-up. And I stayed on as president for 9 years, and then just decided, I actually thought I was going to move on and get out of the industry and just do investing and things like that. But I was bit by the bug, and I have a huge passion for the beauty industry. So I started consulting for a range of hair care and skincare clients in a number of different capacities. So creative product development concepts, technical support. So I work with my previous company and companies all over the US to help them get formulas right and refine formulas, get them stable for my clients. Often I give them they call paper formulas, where I'll formulate it from home. They'll make it on the bench, and then I'll work with them as they make it to refine the procedure, the formula, and things like that. I also write suggested marketing copy, work on brand white space, brand positioning, marketing inputs, anything, whether it's a existing brand, how to progress the brand and the messaging, or whether it's a new brand that's just launching or emerging, and how to really make it unique and stand out. In terms of raw materials, ingredients, there've been a lot of changes over the years since I started in the industry. When I started 25 years ago, basic safety, just skin irritation of both ingredients and finished products was about all that was thought of. That was about all that the FDA required, just basic testing like that. And then little by little, as brands started thinking globally, there would be some global compliance. At that time, it was mostly Japan was really the most regulated. So at that time, it was kind of formulating with things that Japan allowed, and a lot of that was more preservatives, more so than other ingredients. Shortly thereafter, the beauty industry became more obsessed with naturals and plant botanicals, plant extracts. So people were using them really for marketing. Nobody was using them at that point for efficacy. Nobody truly knew what they did. They weren't really, they weren't really tested against synthetic ingredients, and it was kind of more for marketing. And then as the industry progressed, it's become, I don't know if anyone's heard the term, clean beauty has become very big in our industry. So it's more holistic. It's not just about basic safety and skin irritation. It's about being non-toxic. It's about ingredients that are harming the environment, that could be inhaled and things like that. And now it's really emerged into a lot of different areas. Green technology is big, but now it's not just plant extracts. It's really ingredients derived from nature that are tested for certain parts of flowers, seeds, plants, leaves, things like that, that are tested for efficacy for specific claims, whether it's moisturization, desensitization, hydration, calming, and things like that. And some of that is skin plumping and all that kind of thing. So they're really looked at as mainstream ingredients, and they're benchmarked against previous synthetic ingredients. People are a lot more diligent about clean, safe, non-toxic beauty. So people are really looking at ingredients. There's an EWG database, environmental working group, that rates ingredients on the safety from 1 to 5, and the lower the number, the more non-toxic and safe ingredients generally are. So people are really looking to these resources to help them formulate. People are also now formulating for fully global compliance. So not just the like years prior, it was kind of US and you just thought of one or two other markets that were anomalies. Now every market is different. UK, EU, UK has very stringent guidelines. Australia has stringent guidelines. South Korea has stringent guidelines for certain things like fragrances. So every market is really different. And especially with the brands with whom I work that are larger brands, but also some of these new indie startups, I advise them that you have to think about, you can't just think that you're starting in the US and North America or certain markets. You really have to think about formulating as fully globally as you can so that you don't have to, it's very expensive to reformulate down the road. It's very expensive to change packaging with ingredient listings and things like that, and the logistics of that and the inventory and the costs of holding inventory and phasing into new inventory. So you're really better off planning upfront for what markets you think that are your go forward markets. Sustainability and renewable resources is very big in the beauty industry right now. Ingredients like bamboo and mushroom are highly sustainable, highly renewable. Those are being used in a lot of different ways. For instance, people are finding certain specific types of mushrooms that mimic the benefits of hyaluronic acid, which is commonly used in facial skincare for hydration and moisture protection. And finding specific mushrooms that have the same benefits of hydration and moisture protection. So things like that. Biodegradability, especially for EU and UK people and other markets, are really getting into how it breaks down in the environment, how quickly it breaks down, what the residuals are, in the environment and things like that. Ethical trade is also something important to most people with whom I work. Community driven, how indigenous ingredients and products stay within the community. They're transported globally, but they're obviously the resources are staying within the community. Vegan is kind of a non-starter at this point. It's a table stake in the cosmetic industry. So most brands at this point are fully vegan, and that includes things like not using honey, not using beeswax and things like that. Gluten-free is a consideration for a number of brands. Non-GMO, non-genetically modified organisms is also important to many brands. And I would also say a lot of the beauty retailers, most of the brands with whom I work are in either department stores or stores like Sephora or Ulta Beauty. And a lot of these requirements are, if you want to be in their kind of clean beauty department or certification, you have to kind of have a lot of these like vegan and a lot of these certifications. And then the only other thing I would say is many people are always looking for exotic ingredients in the beauty industry, and they're not always using them at efficacious levels for a number of reasons. Sometimes they're too expensive. Sometimes the brands, frankly, even including large brands, want to use them strictly for label claim, and they don't necessarily want to use them at really high efficacious levels. And at times they're not stable at really high levels. So there's a lot of reasons why people use things at different levels. And a lot of these specialty ingredients become commoditized over time. So that at some point you need a real point of difference, a real differentiation of the ingredients so that you really could speak to something. For instance, just having a natural oil or a natural butter from somewhere exotic was sufficient maybe 5 or 10 years ago, but now people want to know really what is, beyond being in the formula, what does it actually do and what does it stand up against? What's the point of difference? Is it more sustainable? Is it, where is it from? We want to know a little bit more about the community and things like that. Is it more effective than something like mineral oil or petrolatum that's a petrochemical? So people are really asking these questions of a lot of ingredients, and people are digging in deeper on those. And that's it for now, and I look forward to answering any other questions as they arise.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Appreciate it. Now we're going to move on to Donald Wilkes, who's going to talk about the flavoring business. And Don, why don't you give a bit intro about yourself and about your business and what you're looking for?
Sure. So we're, I guess in the context of some of the already earlier presentations, we're kind of the very much more of the value-added side on the ingredient side. So I know Donnie spoke very well about the particulars in terms of what is required in terms of the safety, the food safety areas, because he's bringing in ingredients, and then he would then sell them to, say, companies like myself. Our company does both. We would be a buyer of those types of ingredients through someone like Donnie's company, or we will deal directly with the countries, and depending on the scale and value of these products. Sometimes we find, for example, if it's depending on a lot of our ingredients as a flavor company is based on the value, and so we may buy very small quantities, but they have very, very high value. But I just wanted to kind of frame that a little bit early on in this discussion, because I think it's important, and I think the insights that I'll share with you a little bit today are going to be more reflective in terms of how you can better map your products, the areas of, for example, fruits. For example, I can share some stories about my experience with bringing in the baobab powder from Africa, and having the belief that that product would be a very unique and interesting new exotic fruit. And one of the challenges with fruit, because that's one of our expertise, I'll just share a little background with you. So our company started, I founded the company in 1993, but I've been in the flavor industry my whole life. My family had a business in Long Island, New York, but also in Lima, Peru. We were one of the first companies that worked with the Rockefeller Foundation to develop the food industry in Latin America, and Peru was one of the developing countries that we worked in. So I have a long history in the flavor industry from a family business standpoint. But then I started Blue Pacific in '93, and primarily we worked in coffee. My expertise at that time, I did a lot of work in the coffee area, and we did a lot of extraction. And then as the company was growing, I decided to get more into vanilla, and started actually working years ago in Madagascar. We were the first company to partner with a local extractor of vanilla in Madagascar, which had never been done before. Today, there are multiple companies that are doing it. And so over the years, whether it was Indonesia, I'd always go all over the world to try to locate the most exotic and unique raw materials for my business, because much of our industry was very much built on molecule discovery, or what the chemical industry would call synthetic processing of molecules. We were more interested actually in finding these in Mother Nature. And so as the fruit business, we partnered with a company called Plant and Food New Zealand, which is a fruit agro business that does they're basically the largest fruit cultivars in the Australia Asian area. And they basically are the people who have created unique fruit varietals over the years. And so we want to understand how fruit was going to play a role, and how Mother Nature made fruit. And so part of that process is obviously looking at the authenticity of the fruit and seeing how we could become really more farm to flavor as opposed to chemical to flavor. And so that was the journey that started our flavor business. And then it moved from that to certified organic about 15 years ago. We became really strong in certified organic. And today we're probably the largest number of certified organic flavors in North America. And it's a very big part of our business. And being based in California, there's a lot of the natural food industry, many of which probably would be of interest to many of the exporters who might be on this call, because certainly I think a lot of the customized products, particularly ingredients that have stories that Donnie was talking about, a lot of these products are very much connected with consumers that have certain values. And a lot of the Gen Zs, for example, are buying raw material, are buying food products today that have social impact, that have beneficial social impact, that may have obviously environmental value, particularly sustainability. And so there's many boxes that these younger generation buyers are looking for. It's not just a great tasting product. So in our business, we have to obviously always make great tasting products, because we're kind of the Intel inside the food product. So you may not know our company because we're a B2B company, but you would know the brands. If you were here in the United States, we sell some of the largest plant-based food companies in the country, and whether they're beverages or juice drinks or sodas and so forth, or ice creams, we're very much involved in both the formulation and in the supplying the key ingredients, mostly the flavor. So I think when you talk about fruit and exotics, it's one thing that's very, very important to understand, depending upon the scale and the availability of the fruit. If you're looking at it from a high value standpoint, and you're looking at it more towards a niche market, then you won't have necessarily barriers to the market from that standpoint. But if you're looking at it to supply, say, a Coca-Cola or a major Pepsi-Cola company, they typically don't get into anything small. And so you always have to look at your supply chain. If you're a large company, you have to think like them, and you have, or a small company, you have to think like a large company, and you want to really understand where the barriers are for them. And years ago, I was doing a golden kiwi out of New Zealand, and it was a beautiful product. And I remember the Minute Maid people telling me they were ready to buy it tomorrow, and they asked me if I had 50 containers. Well, I didn't have 50 containers of fruit. I wish I did at the time. But the moral of that story was that they love the product, but I didn't have the supply chain built. And if you don't have the supply chain built, you're never going to deliver the revenue model that you're dreaming about on when you deal with larger companies. So be realistic about the market size. Be realistic and focus primarily on how you can deliver a product consistently, maintain the quality, which is obviously today is critical. I know Mark had mentioned about the importance of regulatory. The industry has changed dramatically. Today, the food industry and the flavor industry is very much as important as the quality of our samples are, and we deal with thousands of ingredients that might be available all over the world. And one flavor could have potentially 500 different ingredients in it. Okay, that's how complex our business is. So you can only imagine our inventory management. But it's really important to understand, I think, the value of what you have, and also identify where the customers can use it and how much are they going to use of it. Because if you don't get that right, then you may only have one chance, and if you fail at that chance, it's very, very hard to get back in the U.S. market. But the regulatory safety issues are critical. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that as a flavor company. So we're very active because our ingredients have to be both FEMA GRAS, which is the regulatory, self-regulatory body that basically is governed by FDA. I was the former president of FEMA about a year and a half ago, and I also sit on the global IOFI, which is the International Flavor Industry Association. Those two bodies are actually very important associations because they deal a lot with the global regulatory environment, or in North America for FEMA. And so when let's say you're making an extract, a value added product that may come from a local fruit or vegetable or what have you, or it could be a botanical, you always have to look at the regulatory issues that on these ingredients that you might be wanting to export to the United States, or frankly in other countries like Asia. Asia has become a very dynamic market. It will be in the next 2 years the largest flavor market in the world for our industry. So, as companies look to Asia for supply chain issues, it's important to understand the regulatory environment is quite different there, and the guidelines, many of which have been established nationalistically speaking by each country. So, for example, Korea has their own regulatory approval process. And much of this is not necessarily following JECFA, which is another global governing body, and some of the other CAFCI is China. So each country may have different regulations. Japan is notorious for having different regulations with some of the U.S. ingredients that are approved, and of course the EU is very, very different. So that's important if you're going to be looking at anything value added on the agro side of the business, where you might be isolating, say, something that's in a fruit or vegetable or botanical, and in particular, you have to look at the safety issues and regulatory. When I consider the barriers of market today in the United States, in the flavor for our business, from a business standpoint, you have to remember that everything has changed. Many U.S. food companies the management were incentivized to basically minimize inventory, to have quick inventory turns. And now that just-in-time methodology, process, I should say, is completely thrown out the window. So today it's all about going long if you have to, because we're trying to manage unfathomable supply chain disruptions that we've never seen before. And so many companies have gone long. And so the idea that if you're shipping from Africa, we experience this because we have a partnership in Tanzania where we extract vanilla. And I can tell you that it's been a real challenge, both booking containers and getting the right boats because there's all sorts of logistic nightmares. So I would highly recommend that as you set out to look at export, number one, you want to find a very good agent here, because I think it's very challenging to get through the net, to navigate some of the paperwork and documentations. But most importantly, I think internally in your businesses, you're going to need really strong logistics. To me, logistics is the new regulatory. It's a new compliance issue that we, and as an industry, almost feel it's as important as, say, the flavor itself. So when we sample somebody, they say to us, well, if you don't have the documents, we're not gonna evaluate your product. And so I think today, when I look at supply chain, I want to know what your logistics is like, who you're working with, because that's going to be really important. So I'd highly recommend that. So that, dealing with these unique challenges in terms of disruption is really creating, I think, a lot of financial burden on the importers. So another area that I would recommend highly is to look at how you can get some type of bank financing, inventory financing, so that you can offer some value to your future clients in terms of terms, because this is a big challenge right now. If people have to take 6 months of inventory, that's putting a huge cash flow burden on companies. Even my business, for example, because I have to go long on so many raw materials. So I think it's important you look at how these importers and companies that would be using your materials, how are their business being run, and how does financing play a role in that decision-making process between who they would want to import from. So I think that's going to be very critical. I'd like to also talk a little bit about our concept as a company. We're very much into farm to flavor. I mentioned earlier that a lot of our industry has traditionally been very chemical driven, through synthesis, biotechnology, and many other areas. We tend to be very simplified in terms of our approach to designing and creating flavors, and we want to work with farms, and we do work with a lot of farms here in North America, but I also have done work in Sri Lanka. We've worked even in China. We have a facility in China. So I think there's one of the underlying things that we see is the issues around pesticides. There's a lot of global concerns relative to pesticides and how that and the regulatory compliance issues are getting much stricter. So again, if you guys are looking at ingredients that may or may have indirectly, if you're growing products in your field that was using pesticides, you have to be wary of the fact that pesticides are systemic, and thus they can even get into, quote, organic lands if they're nearby. And so this is going to be a big issue going forward. I think pretty much, I think I've covered pretty much, it's a lot of stuff to talk about, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And if you want to learn more about our company, please visit our website at bluepacificflavors.com. It will give you a lot of background and information on the company and any more background that you need. Thank you.
Thank you to all three presenters. You were all wonderful. I'm going to start from some of the questions that we received in advance, but one that I know is bound to come up as well relates to what we got in advance, and particularly for both Donnie and Donald, a little more than Mark. I can imagine some of the companies that are participating on this webinar in Southern Africa who have not really exported to the United States before, wanting to contact both of you and saying, I'm ready to sell you. I'm ready to sell you. I have my product. So I know we touched on some of this, but I'm going to ask each of you to touch on, for some of those companies that are ready to start approaching the U.S. market, some kind of hints as to how they would be best off starting to do that. Would it be contacting people like you directly? Would it be going to trade shows? Would it be finding the actual importers, or finding an agent or broker here, or any combination of the above? So Donald, why don't you start on the flavoring side, and then Donnie, you can pick up from there.
Well, I think that it depends on the raw material, on the product, on the raw material. I go back to the is it something that is, would be incredibly useful? For example, vanilla is not necessarily a huge agricultural crop, but it has an incredibly high value. But when the market is lower, it becomes more commoditized. So I would probably say that I would probably try to get all of those, Peter. In other words, I would start initially, and the strategy being, one is that a lot of times in our business, it takes a significant period of time to get approved. There's all sorts of regulatory compliance for us. Just to give you a little bit of an example on what, typically on what we do. On the regulatory side, I would say that we typically are, we look at obviously this testing, the verification of the raw material. Then we have to have the supplier get what we call the raw material approval process. And then there's commercial standardization. And then we have to commercialize the formula before we even buy it. That typically could take anywhere from 6 months, depending on, or could be quick. It really just depends. So I think it's important that if you're having an export strategy, you don't want to just be relying on, let's say, a direct relationship with a flavor company. I think, Donnie's business probably has a lot of different channels relative to some of these ingredients that might offer a value and more immediacy in terms of sales. I think so. It really depends on what the ingredient is, and obviously whether it's a seasonal item. Is it something that's perishable, for example? There's a lot of questions I would probably have to get more deep involved with to give you the right channel.
And Donald, just before Donnie pipes in on that, do you have, when you look to buy from new suppliers, do you have preferences to work directly with them or through a broker, or does it not matter? It's just how it comes to you?
I think in general, I only work direct if the quantities are substantial. In other words, I don't feel the logistics time-wise for us. It's, again, well, we're what we call a high value added manufacturer. So our business is, very high value. We're kind of the end of the chain, right to the end. We're kind of the Intel chip inside the food. So, we're not necessarily a commodity-based product. So a lot of the products that we're talking about, maybe coming in from Africa, are going to be a little bit more on the basic raw material side. So I would probably, I would tell you that we would bring in something direct if it was an item that was really unique, that we wanted exclusive on, and we've done that in the past. If it's a really, unusual fruit or ingredient that has health benefits, for example, that we think is already GRAS. A lot of these value-added ingredients that may have health or nutritional or nutraceutical benefits require much more expensive testing and regulatory approval. That becomes a problem, particularly if it's used in a food. Now, if it's used in a cosmetic, I know there's a whole different slew of approval process and compliance issues. But in food, in general, the FDA is who we listen to. So if the product is GRAS, that's great, because then we can use it. Then we don't have any issues. That usually requires a fairly decent investment on the export country to get that approval process.
Donnie, if you could speak on the ingredient side, where you're importing at a more raw material level for sometimes sale that way or further processing.
Yeah, I think I would say if you're just starting out and you want to ship to the United States, it's going to be really important to work with an experienced importer in the beginning to help kind of guide you through the process of everything, because the landscape changes yearly with new rules that come out and new regulations that come out. And it's not just the FDA, it's the USDA as well that you have to watch, because there's certain insects, there's certain other things that aren't allowed in here that the USDA monitors.
Right.
When we import something, there's 3 levels that it has to clear. It needs to clear the USDA, it needs to clear the FDA, and it needs to clear customs. So there's 3 different things that we have to clear to bring it into the US. So I think it would be important to make sure you're working with somebody who's established. And again, as Donald kind of mentioned, it's going to depend on the product. I can't speak very much about, a branded packaged product that you would want to bring into the US, because we sell everything in bulk. But I know that if you were going to work on a branded product, that even if a retailer came to you and they wanted to put your product inside their stores in the US, you need to make sure that you have all the labeling laws the right way, the nutrition put the right way, all the information that's on the package needs to be accurate, or you won't be able to ship it out to the stores that way. So I think that it is very important to try to work with an established company that can kind of help walk you through the process and do it the right way from the beginning, so that you're not trying to catch up the whole time. And you know, to kind of go back to the question you'd asked Donald in regards to brokers, we work with a lot of brokers around the world. Sometimes the brokers are the people who go and do plant inspections for us as well, depending on where it is. But if I was going to bring something new from an area, I would call one of my brokers in those areas and start asking them questions. What do you know about this supplier? What do you know about this? Even what we'll do is if we're bringing in something from a country that's a new ingredient or a new supplier for us, we'll call existing suppliers that we know in that country and just ask them, do you know anything about this company? Do you know anything about this product? And they'll give us a lot of insight on things like that. In some cases, we've had, you know, exporters help other companies with the export process from those countries too. So in the end of the day, we want to make sure that the product's safe and that it's sustainable. And, you know, before we wire, you know, in most cases, a lot of these shipping containers cost 6 figures. Before we wire that somewhere, we want to make sure everything's completely legitimate and there's not a lot of risk for us on that side of it.
Donnie, could you speak for a moment, because you're in more of the commoditized end of some of these items, about the role price plays versus quality?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, well, quality is always going to be the most important for us because we don't want a headache after the product gets here. If you try to save a little bit of money in the beginning and buy maybe questionable quality, you're going to pay for it down the line several times. And having gone through a recall several years ago, it can get in, you know, above $1 million very quick. A recall can in the U.S. So the quality is really, really important. But the price does need to be competitive as well for us to be able to make sense of bringing it in. In some cases, what we see, you know, I'll take coconut as an example. We import coconut from Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Vietnam, and the Philippines. And all of our suppliers have the same certifications. They have the same specifications, and our customers have approved them all. So if the price is better from one of the origins, we have to stay competitive against our competition inside the U.S. So that's when we might have to buy from another origin in order to be competitive on the price side of it, because these are commodities, and we, you know, at the end of the day, you know, you're not making a huge margin, and if you do lose money, you have to sell a lot of product to make up just your losses, and then you're kind of working it for nothing, and nobody enjoys that at all. So the prices do still have to be competitive. I will say though, if you have an item that, in our experience, if you're launching a new item to market that doesn't really exist right now or is very small, it's a lot easier to maintain a higher price when you're the first one to market with it, and then hold that price level up. Generally, what we'll see happen when we launch a new product is for about 18 months, the price will remain really good. And then as the product gets traction in the US and more people are talking about it and it's getting its way into more brands or more ingredient usage, it becomes commoditized. It's almost every time we see that. So in the beginning, I mean, in the beginning you might get a premium. In the end, it still becomes a commodity if it can be grown from other places too, and come into the US that way.
Thank you very much. I had a question in the chat about baobab specifically. So Mark, you had mentioned, and we have talked about it previously, and Donald, you had mentioned something about baobab. So Donald, if you could start and talk about your experience and what you were referring to, and then Mark, you can talk about baobab in the cosmetics industry after that.
Yes, sure. So the baobab story is interesting because when I went to Africa and also when I spent time in Madagascar, I fell in love with the baobab tree. They're incredible trees. And the fruit story was really powerful, particularly with what the indigenous people have used baobab for years. And we met a company who had started on that similar journey and had branded their product here in the United States. And they were selling it into Whole Foods, but they really weren't selling a lot of it. It was very much more of a specialty product in the food sector. They were selling it, some of the seed oil and so forth was being sold for cosmetic, and I'm sure Mark will talk about that. But our experience, very simple, was this. What we tried to do is we built a story around it in terms of the authenticity of the product coming from different parts of Africa. We actually even fermented it and tried to create a range of kombuchas with it. And one of the challenges that we saw was that Americans generally have a very narrow view of flavor preference. I know that there's some people that are on the culinary side that might say that there's a lot more interest in exotics, but when you look at the commercial scalability of products today, historically, big food companies just don't get behind a lot of these exotics in a big way. They typically go for traditional flavors. And so one of the challenges was, how do we get this scalable? How do we create the value to the African communities that are producing baobab? And that was something that we ran into a big challenge on, because even though we had a wonderful story, we couldn't get these companies, and I'm talking middle-sized companies, not just the Pepsi-Colas of the world or Coca-Colas. We couldn't get them to move on it because they typically bring consumer insights and data to their pre-marketing or choices on flavor. And because of that, if the consumer doesn't know it, they don't buy it. And so there's a significant education that still needs to go on about baobab and the value of baobab. So that's one of the challenges that we learned in the process.
Mark, you could pick up from there very nicely, I think.
Yeah, and I had similar experiences in the beauty industry. So I've worked with baobab oil and extract a number of times over the years, and as per our previous conversations, you know, a lot of brands, the value of, they're willing to spend money on things that will boost their clinicals, boost their real claims on like topical skincare, where they'll send it out to a third-party lab for moisturization claims and wrinkle reduction claims and things like that, but they're not necessarily willing to, and some of those ingredients are peptides and ceramides and things like that. They're not necessarily looking to spend the money on the formula cost on really high levels of things like that. The other thing is, in certain formulas, very high levels of oils have a higher oxidation rate. So you almost, oftentimes you want to be careful about which oils the oil load in a given formula, because they tend to oxidize at a higher rate. Years ago in our industry, we used BHT, was a very effective antioxidant for oils. It's no longer being used that often in the beauty industry because, again, it doesn't fall into this clean beauty and green beauty, but same kind of thing. Baobab's been used fairly frequently, generally at lower levels, because a lot of brands just don't see a value at using it at a high level. The couple of people that have done like 100% baobab oil that's a face oil are really niche, smaller kind of brands and indie brands.
Thank you. I think some of the questions that Derek and I have gotten over the past when we've worked with individual companies in Southern Africa, and some of what I'm seeing here, brings up a question of many of these, or a number of the participants will be at the Fancy Food Show in New York in a couple of weeks. And then there's the natural products shows and some others. Can you each of you give some guidance from your perspective when folks in Southern Africa are coming to these shows, what their expectations should be and really what their focus should be, and how they should approach attending these shows as an exhibitor? And then separately, if some of them decide they are going to come to these shows and walk the shows, you know, how they should approach that, because I think that's a very important way that we've seen over the years for them to learn about the markets here and kind of start to get their feet wet. So, whichever one of you wants to start off, I'd like each of the three of you to kind of address that. Donald, I'll ask you to start since you're the first one on my screen. You got lucky. Okay.
Well, I think first off, I would tell your story if you're going to be exhibiting there. I feel today that the storytelling, the narrative of what you do is equally powerful to what you sell. In other words, I think in this regard, where American consumers are evolving, and particularly with Generation Z, and some of the values that they have, I think it's really important that buyers who are smart buyers today, the more because a lot of the large food companies today are looking at how they're going to capture this evolving new consumer. You know, it's not people my age that are looking for targeting today. You know, they want to understand how their products are going to be maintaining their market share if it doesn't really establish any connection with the values of some of the consumers that are going to be having the the ability to spend money in the future. And certainly Gen Zs and the millennials will be having a majority of that spend in the future. So I think telling your story and how you do that, tell it authentically and show the people and what the impact is to the communities, the environment. All these things are very, very important in terms of the products that you're trying to sell.
Thanks. Donnie, you're next on my screen, so you're up.
I think some of the really important things to be ready to talk about are multiple applications that you can use your products inside of. So, we kind of have 3 different people on this call right now. So if your product's good for extracts or flavoring, if it's good for cosmetics, and if it's good for food, be prepared to tell people how it can be used in that, so that if, an existing brand or an R&D person walks up to you, you can explain to them that this is a great way to get an extra boost of fiber. This is a great way to get an extra thing of protein that maybe doesn't taste so earthy, whatever it is. So have some meaningful information ready to go to help get people's minds working about why they would want to use your ingredient. I think that's one important thing. Marketing materials also, so that if somebody asks you for information, you can immediately get it to them, whether it's handing it to them or immediately following up after the show with them, having some very good market information on that. What our customers really love to see, recipes for these different things, like how can I use this to make something? How can I use it in a grain-free chip? How can I use it in a beverage? Is it soluble? So on, like that. Also capturing these leads, so that if you did find a company like us, sometimes the decision for us to bring on a new ingredient is, one of our suppliers said, look, I came to the Natural Products Show and I walked it, and I have 20 people who are interested in this. I just need a partner who's willing to bring it in to help distribute it to them. So if you can capture the leads, so that if you do find somebody who's willing to distribute your product in the United States, you can go to them and say, look, I have these people who are interested in it. And in some cases, it may be existing customers for us already. So we can call those guys and say, hey, I know you talked with this person about this ingredient. How serious are you? What are you thinking about doing with it? So we can start building up a customer base to say, yeah, it makes sense to bring this in. We know some people we can sell it to. As an importer, we like to try to find a couple anchor customers so we at least know we can sell it to somebody if we're going to bring it in. We hate to bring something in, launch it, and it never goes anywhere. We don't have any way to get rid of it. So if you have some leads from the show that you can present to somebody that you might partner with, that goes a long way for somebody to take the risk to bring in a new ingredient as well.
Mark?
As a beauty industry executive, I go to a lot of trade shows, same kind of thing. So I look myself for new ingredient introductions, but specifically, is it story? Are there clinicals? Are there efficacy? Is it something new to the market altogether? Obviously, is there safety and documentation and things like that? So people are certainly always looking for newness, and I part of my job is also to identify new, compelling, key ingredients for formulas, but that will also drive A, the story, but B, the efficacy and the performance. And to echo what Donald and Donnie said, also the point of difference is very important. So whether it's social impact, community impact, sustainability, same kind of thing. It's very important to have a point of difference and a differentiation. In the beauty industry, a lot of the raw material suppliers that also amongst other industries as well, companies like BASF, company like Givaudan, which is a global perfume manufacturer, whatever, they've been buying up a lot of these niche raw material ingredient suppliers over the last 5 years or so. So a lot of them sell these ingredients through their niche divisions, and they're buying them and scaling them and things like that. So it's done at a small level, and it's now done at, some of the very large companies are also offering more specialized ingredients.
Thanks a lot. I'd like to add one thing about coming to a trade show and participating, whether as an exhibitor or walking it, and any contacts you make, which is the importance of follow-up. I've seen so many companies overseas come here to the US, whether it's at a trade show, at times we've taken them around through projects, and then they go back home, and we all have this tendency, we get back home, we unpack, we put business cards and notes on our desk, and we have a million things to take care of, and you forget to follow up. And you need to remember that you're approaching the buyers here, you're approaching the importers here, you're approaching the brokers here. Once in a while, they'll follow up with you because they were really intrigued and they met you, but they've got the same issue when they go back to their business. And especially with what's going on today, we're all overwhelmed. So when you get back home, you need to follow up consistently. And remember that you heard from some people, it could take 12 to 24 months to get your breakthrough into this market. So if you follow up for 1 or 2 months and you don't hear, don't stop following up. I've had cases where I've worked with buyers on products and it's taken me a couple of years to get in there. But once we do, it's become a big item for us to sell. So that's important. We had, Mark, one other question about, I think it was you that mentioned it, clean beauty and kind of what you mean by that and you know, what do you think is important to be able to call it clean beauty?
So clean beauty it's a very big term in the beauty industry right now. And it's funny because it's not regulated by the FDA, it's regulated largely by the retailers. So Sephora, for instance, has their own clean beauty. They have a whole list of clean beauty guidelines. Ulta Beauty has their list, Target has their list. So what a lot of brands do is either you look at their list and compile all that together, and that becomes kind of the brand's clean beauty list, in which case it gets very restrictive, so that there's a lot of ingredients you can't use, there's a lot of formulating that's limited, or you develop your own credo where the brand, and this is what I encourage on the brands with whom I work to develop a credo that works for you. For instance, like in our industry, silicones is traditionally very big in hair care. They tend to be highly protective. They tend to block out frizz and add shine and things like that. There's been a big push over the last few years to eliminate silicones and find more natural alternatives, which are plant derived esters. And they don't work exactly the same. They just don't they don't perform the same. When you get the shine, you get more heaviness. So they have their limitations. So I kind of, when I speak with brands and advise them, each brand has to make their own decision of almost what's more important. We could push the envelope on performance, but do you have a narrative, a point of view on whether we use silicones because we believe that while they're synthetic, they're still the best for the hair, or are we willing to give up a little bit, which you don't communicate that necessarily to consumers and beauty editors, but give up a drop of performance to have something that's more clean and green. And the clean beauty, it's a lot of different things. Like I said, it's non-toxic, it's not irritating. It also involves being vegan, sustainable, renewable. So there's a lot of different variables, and it's not governed by any agency. It's actually really more retailer driven at this point.
Thanks. One other question on the cosmetic side that will come up. I know personally from Expo West, from the Natural Products Show, there are a lot of more natural cosmetics and beauty and hair care companies presenting there and represented there. Are there any other trade shows that the folks in those segments of the industry should think about?
I mean, there's a show called Cosmoprof that's global. So it's once a year in Bologna in Italy, and it's once a year. It's actually coming up in July in Las Vegas. That's one of the bigger beauty shows for hair care, skincare. It's ingredients, it's packaging, it's everything beauty under one roof. And it's a large show, and it certainly is good to walk around. Brands exhibit there as well. So for somebody that's new to the market, it is a great place to walk around and see the breadth of packaging. And again, even within packaging, you see options that are now sustainable, renewable, bottles that are derived from sugarcane. So you see all these different things. Some ingredient suppliers, some brands, not so much the large global beauty brands, but some indie brands where they have a whole section of emerging indie brands. And you kind of see what's on trend, what's available, and things like that. That's probably the most beneficial because it's kind of everything under one roof for beauty.
Thanks so much. I'd like to see if each of you could talk for a moment about the role of organic and its future and its relative importance to these folks, not only today, but down the road in your part of the business. Mark, you can start on that, and then we'll go the other way.
So organics in the beauty industry is largely unregulated. other than if you're USDA or Cosmos EcoCert. And most of those brands, it tends to be kind of more mass to masstige in the beauty industry here. So most of the brands that are certified organic, and it's extremely limiting when you get into high performance ingredients, emulsifiers, like even ingredients that hold products together, that keep them stable. It gets very limiting. Most of those kind of products are in Whole Foods and stores like that. Generally, and people really don't just incorporate organic ingredients in beauty. So if you're in, I really deal with high performing, more luxury brands where they don't get into organic because they're not kind of in that food beauty space, and they generally don't use organic ingredients. I mean, they're used, but they're not called out, so they're generally not required, just because that's not a key element. It only becomes in beauty a key element for, like I said, kind of Whole Foods brands. So it's less. And again, it's very, unless you're USDA certified, it's a very general term that's not that defined in beauty.
Thanks a lot. Donnie, can you speak about it from the ingredient side?
Yeah, I mean, our business is about 70% organic from a dollar standpoint. So we're focused heavily on the organic side of things, and we see a lot of growth in organic as well. What we see is maybe not brands using 100% organic ingredients, but maybe they want to focus in on 2 or 3 ingredients that are organic inside of their product, so they can at least call out that they're using something that is organic. It'll be very interesting to monitor how things happen with inflation right now. One of the big things that kind of happened, during the last recession in the U.S. is that organic was almost twice as expensive as conventional at that time, and everybody went to non-GMO, and instead of organic because it was so expensive. But the price gaps really closed a lot on organic inside now in the U.S., where it doesn't trade for twice the price. It could be anywhere from 10% to 40% more expensive for an organic item versus a conventional item. And there's been a lot of good projects going on around the world. The consumers definitely care about it. We get asked a lot about it and how we know that it's organic, how we can guarantee it's organic. And for us, there's a lot of work that goes into that too. First, we always say the proof's in the pudding. When we test something, and we spend thousands of dollars on each container load of organic product to test it, to make sure there is no pesticides inside of it, and then hold the suppliers accountable if something does have it inside of there. But I think that that's a market that's going to keep growing. I know my generation, all my friends, really care about organic, and we all have young kids. There's a bigger thing for that. And some of the bigger retailers that we like to get into, Costco being the number one, would be their focus is always to try to get it to be organic when they can on their shelf. They like to add that value to it. And Costco, I think, was, but I'm sure they still are, was the largest seller of organic ingredients in the United States. So it's never a deal breaker for an innovative product, but it certainly, people care a lot. Our company cares a lot as well about that. We find it important, just from the thought of, putting pesticides inside of our bodies anyways, and the amount that can be added to things. So I think if you can do it organic, it's a great way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I think what Donnie's saying, relative to the food ingredient side, but obviously for us, I can share that our organic, certified organic flavors are the fastest growing out of our business today, going over double-digit growth, well over double-digit growth for many, many years. And so we see that business becoming more scalable now. I think really the issues around pesticides are not going away. In fact, I would argue that they would be even more, there are going to be more barriers for a lot of food products in the coming years, as a lot of the regulatory issues after COVID are going to be looked at, whether it's a new administration, some new food transparency legislation that are going on right now, petitions and so forth. So at least in North America, we see the organic situation as one of the only safe places for most consumers to trust food that they eat. So in a lot of respects, there's a higher value that people will pay for organic. We saw that years ago with natural. People would pay 10% more for a natural product as opposed to an artificial flavored product. And so we think that if you're selling organic, you can be sure it's going to be less commoditized than the traditional a conventional crop or ingredients, for example. And you're going to hopefully have build some higher value. But there is costs associated with it. Donnie mentioned USDA certification is a must. And obviously making sure that you have all your documentation and compliance. But from our standpoint as a flavor company, I've pretty much bet the house on organic, and I'm a firm believer in it because a lot of the larger companies have challenges in meeting that requirement. And so, if you can do, if the market continues to grow, which it is, it's going to be harder and harder for companies who don't have those certifications to compete in that market. So, I'm a big proponent of it, and I think it's a very valuable strategy if you have the opportunity to be certified organic.
If I could add a little bit on the organic side, the organic part of the business, while it has still been relatively small in percentage in the food business, has been by far the largest growing part of the food business and grows very consistently. So I think many of us can see a day, I don't know when it'll be, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, where organic will be a higher percentage than conventional for many food products and ingredients. I just want to say we're kind of running short on. Go ahead, Donnie.
Two more things that just popped in my head too. One thing that happens a lot in these industries is if something happens in, say, the UK or the EU, it happens in the US. Or if it happens in the US, it follows over to the EU and the UK. Gluten-free is a great example. Before gluten-free was even a topic in the United States, it was a very, very big topic in the UK. And it followed over into the United States. And a lot of the regulations and things we learned from customers in the UK that had been doing it for years when it evolved inside the United States. And organic is very, very, especially in Germany, but in Europe, organic is very important. I mean, the Germans are trying to get where everything is organic. That is like their drive there. And that will follow through Europe, which will follow into the United States as well, because these trends go back and forth between these two regions. Another thing is that as an importer, we'll see ingredients. I'll take pumpkin seeds from China and coconut as an example. Sometimes, and even pine nuts too, another really important one. Sometimes the price difference, if you take a pine nut, a conventional pine nut might cost us $10 a pound, and an organic pine nut might cost us $10.30 a pound. We'll just buy the organic pine nuts, and that's what we're going to bring to market. So if we have the decision to pay just a little bit more for the organic, we know that we can still sell it as conventional, but it gives us the option to be able to sell it to more people as organic inside the US. Some of our retailers will say, look, there's not a big difference between conventional and organic, and we carry them both. We're just going to go to organic now. And so we see that on certain ingredients. Coconut's another one. There's never a huge price difference. So we help kind of steer some of our customers that way to use the organic versus the conventional. And then we don't even buy the conventional. We only buy the organic, and we use that for our distribution in the US.
So if I could add to follow up on that, if you're in the food supply or flavor supply business, whether it's a raw material or a processed product from Southern Africa, you would be very wise to think about setting yourself up to be as organic as possible now or down the road, because it takes time if you have to particularly go through the field work of making sure the field has lied fallow or has not used pesticides for a period of time. It takes time to get to that point, and you can't just turn on a dime then. We are running very short on time. So number one, I'd like to do a quick summary on some of the important points that we heard today. And then I'd also like to tell the people who've put questions in the chats and stuff, we will figure out the best ways to follow up with you on your individual item questions or for contacts to us or to the participants on the panel who are all wonderful. A couple of things that I want to highlight that we heard about today is the absolute basic requirement to have an FDA registration and food safety certifications. If you don't have that, you're going to have an extraordinarily difficult time getting anyone to listen to you, to work with you. If you're in the process of doing it and can tell your story, that's great. The next point I wrote down was the importance of consistency as a supplier, both in quality and quantity. The U.S. is an enormous market. Everyone wants to be in the U.S. but we're also 300 plus million people. So if you really want to have a future in the US market and your product catches on, or you want to be a supplier, you will have to have enough volume and a consistent level to be able to make it here. In the cosmetic side, the importance of vegan and non-GMO and meeting not just US specs, but world specs for many of these companies is there. And the biggest thing I think that one should take away, or one of the biggest things from today's presentations, is the ability as a supplier to differentiate yourself. It can be your story about your product. It can be your story about the land. It can be the story about the people who are handling the goods. It can be the story about you as a supplier and your reputation and history. When we imported spices and herbs for decades, we were selling the same spices and herbs that our competitors could buy and sell. So how did we differentiate ourselves in the marketplace? We differentiated ourselves by being a high quality, consistent supplier at a fair price. And if there was a problem, and I promise you when you're selling food products, somewhere along the way there will be problems, we took care of our customers' problem for them. And that's how we took a commodity, which many of you folks in Africa are really supplying, and differentiated ourselves as a supplier. Well, to the extent that you can do that overseas and differentiate yourself that way, you will be a treasured supplier. We often said that we were only as good as our suppliers, and we told our customers very often that we paid more attention to our suppliers than our customers, because if we didn't have the right product at the right price, they didn't want to buy from us, and it was that simple. The next thing is that I want to remind you of is the importance of dealing with logistics in today's world. It has never, in my 40 plus years in the import business, been as important as it is now and as difficult as it is now. So if you do not have the right supply chain set up to get your product to the market here in a reasonable way, in a fair time frame, you're not going to be able to do business here today. And I don't think that's going to change so quickly with, COVID and wars and all those things going on, oil situations. It's not changing. And the interesting thing through COVID is that we have imported more containers of goods into the United States than pre-COVID, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down. So you have to be able to get it here or you can't sell it. I want to thank all three of our panelists. You guys were wonderful. We will follow up with you, and we will talk to you about how people on the webinar would like to follow up with you if possible, and how to get them to you. I'd like to turn this back to Tammy to give us a closing remarks. And before I do that, I want to thank everybody who participated at every level, from the organizers to the participants on the panel to the audience who's listening today. Tammy? I think you're on mute.
Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you very much to our panelists. This was very enriching, and we hope that our exporters and potential exporters are still going to reach out to you and the USA Trade Hub, just to ensure that they get more information, so that when we send our stuff out, we are not penalized and we reach the market in the way that we would like to reach it. The next steps. Okay, this just shows some of the success stories throughout the project. We are in the 6th year of the project, which is our final year, and we already have success stories, people who have worked through the process. We started off discussing like this, and they have gone on to be able to export to the US. So it is possible. For more information on this particular webinar and any other webinars, you are able to get that from www.satihub.com, and almost everything that we have engaged in terms of webinars and customer contact linkages, you will find there, even some of the tools that we use as we work with exporters. Upcoming events for the USA Trade Hub, June 8 and 15, we have a capacity building workshop for Namibia. And then June 9, we have exporting to the US. That is the USAID in partnership with Mpumalanga Economic Growth Agency. And then we have a physical attendance of some of our firms at the Summer Fancy Food Show 2022 from the 12th to the 14th of June. And June 24, we have a webinar on actioning and follow-up for return on investment. I think that was discussed that we need to follow up whatever we have picked up from trade fairs and any linkages. And then on June 29, the South African cluster with South African firms and South African trade promotion service providers are hosting the AGOA Exporters Awards. Thank you once again, and here are the contact details for the country representatives. In all 9 countries, you will have someone that you can talk to. I think some of what I picked here is some of the firms were asking who they can contact. Please feel free to contact the USA Trade Hub, and then they'll get you in touch with the market linkages and other partners. Thank you. Have a lovely evening.